Welcome back, America. My guest is from Ohio as well. Terry Pluto joins me, Dean of Ohio sports writer, longtime friend of the program. Hello, Terry. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Hello there, Hugh. Actually, there's part of Michigan I like. Are you
Uh-oh.
ready?
Oh, you go on
The
vacation
Upper
with
Peninsula.
Roberta to Michigan.
Yes, the Upper Peninsula, which
Yeah.
consider the fact that, let's see, I think the Upper Peninsula is probably farther from Ann Arbor than Cleveland
I think you're right. Terry, I want to tell you the
by
reason I had you on
a mile.
today is number one,
Yes.
I usually say grace on Thanksgiving because I'm the senior man in the area. And I won't say I'm thankful for Terry's talking, but I am. You and David Campbell do a fabulous job on Terry's talking. I listen to it every week. I am thankful for your columns, which entertain me. I'm thankful for the podcast, but I am also thankful that you do prison ministry. And I'm raising money right now for Angel Tree Prison Fellowship. What do you do for prison ministry on Thanksgiving? Is there anything that goes on? Because we often think of prisoners at Christmas, but not at Thanksgiving.
Well, Hugh, I've actually the last few years I have switched totally over to the Haven Arrest, which is the city of Mission, the city mission in Akron. A lot of change came during the pandemic and that, but so that's where I'll be though tomorrow night, and basically every holiday, and we do services 2 to 3 times a month there. So whether you and Angel Tree comes into play there because a lot of those guys are coming in and out of prison, and unfortunately, we did it for 20 years, and I run into guys that I had 15 years ago that are kind of floating back and forth. But it's such a big deal. Anything you can do, it the Chuck Colson thing and Angel Trees is a fabulous program, and I wouldn't say that unless I'd had personal. In other words, I've been involved with it. Our church, Arlington Church of God in Akron, we do a lot with Angel Tree and so do all the others. So it's a best thing. But I mean, it's a tough time of year whether you're in prison or you're going to be like tomorrow night at Akron's Haven of Rest, which is the city mission in Akron. Um, in fact, I've done a thing recently called the empty chair, where I put an empty chair up on the stage and said that, look, somebody's missing, or maybe that's you missing from your family or that. So it's a really tough time.
I read your column last week, the empty chair column. It's a pointed dagger at the heart, and I would recommend anyone to go just Google Terry Pluto in the empty chair. He writes a column on faith once a week for the Cleveland.com site. He's a sports writer, but he's also a very learned and smart guy when it comes to faith and life, and I appreciate that column. Now, I want to run down a list with you, Terry. This is a Thanksgiving
Okay.
show, and I'm going to tell you some names that I am thankful for, and then we're going to talk about them. Donovan Mitchell, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Terry Francona, Dennis Eckersley, Ray Fosse, Nick Chubb, Brian Sipe, Baker Mayfield, Bernie Kosar, Andre Thornton, Oral Hershiser, Clay Matthews, Dick Ambrose, Mark Price, Nate Thurman, Austin Carr, Joe Thomas, Joel Batonio, Lenny Wilkins, Bill Fitch, Sam Ratigliano, Marty Schottenheimer, Jason Kipnis, Ozzie Newsome, and I want to end with Kevin Stefanski. What do those guys have in common? You've covered them all. What do they have in common?
It's a really wide ranging list. I know just about all of them personally. Why don't It's your list, Hugh? So why don't you lead off and start?
Well, as a fan, not as a professional sports writer, as a fan, they were good men on the field and off. They were great
Mm-hmm.
examples of playing hard. They had no drama. They were just complete professionals who did their jobs, never complained, as far as I know. I don't know if any of these guys held out. I can't remember Andre Thornton ever holding out. The reserve clause was probably around when Andre Thornton stands out because he lost his whole family in that terrible van crash and he came back. But now we're
Mm-hmm.
into Jameis, and I hope they keep Jameis for 2 years and draft a rookie. But they're all good guys, right? Sam Ratigliano, they're all good people. They're no drama. Isn't that wonderful to cover?
And on top of it, they embraced being in Cleveland, whether they're from this area, which Bernie Kosar was, being from your way out towards Warren. He was from
Boardman,
Boardman.
yeah.
or they came here, like Andre Thornton grew up in the Philadelphia area, came here, and he still lives in the area. So those are guys that I think got it. In fact, a lot of people, you know, probably even where you live on either coast, is this flyover country, et cetera. And then they spend some time here and they realize, gee, it's really nice not to have to sit an hour and a half in traffic every day going wherever you're going. And that, Cleveland, for example, is the smallest city with Major League Baseball, the NFL, and the NBA. I'm thankful for that because I love covering the major sports, but I'm glad I don't have to deal with, say the Washington Baltimore traffic or some of those places.
Oh, amen. Stay right where you are, Terry. I want to go back over a couple of names on this list and then ask you specifically about Kevin Stefanski, who I hope we're talking about in 10 years when we do another Thanksgiving show, because I love the guy and his approach to football. I'm going to ask you about that. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm going to put it all on the website, all on the podcast, and go get Terry's Talking, or go look up Terry Pluto on Google and read The Empty Chair. You'll be glad you did. So I'm back now with Terry Pluto. Terry, I've only met one guy on this list. Actually, two. I've met Brian Sipe, who became a Christian after football, and we had lunch out in California one day. He said, no one in Cleveland would believe how I live now. And I met Dennis Eckersley at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I was so overcome by fan shyness, I mumbled. I couldn't say anything. I'm a professional talker, but he was a really
Yeah.
nice guy. Am I wrong about anyone on this list being a good person, as far as you know?
No, I mean, Jameis Winston's a fascinating story because he had some off the field stuff with women when he was at Florida State in his early years in
Early on.
Tampa. But since then, since 2017, there's been nothing, and it's been just the opposite. For example, when he played in New Orleans for 4 years, he won the Ed Block Courage Award, which goes for character. It is voted by your teammates. Uh, he has pumped life into this dismal season, just with his attitude and also the fact that he can throw the ball well too. So that's one. Eckersley is fascinating also because uh, he went through a period of heavy drinking. We'll talk about that. In fact, he told me when I wrote the book, Cursory Rock, that one of the things that turned him, he got drunk at his young daughter's birthday party. They taped it and showed it to him. And that's what really got him on the road to sobriety. So, um, that's really a
Didn't
cool
know
thing
that.
to see. And then, yeah, and you're right. He is totally unpretentious and I've always been thrilled about that. And then um, Stefanski is just a really quote unquote normal guy. By the way, Andrew Berry is too. They are in terms of people, off the field, living it the right way. And despite all the problems the Browns have had this year in the past, that was always the rumors leaking out and who hated who and all the. I remember Jimmy Haslam when they fired Hugh Jackson and somebody else called it internal discord. I always like that one. You knew that came from somebody in PR. Well, they haven't had internal discord. They've had problems winning games, and the Deshaun Watson thing has been a mess. But in terms of I think how Stefanski's handled all this stuff. I'm with you. I like him, and I hope they stick with him.
Now, I wanted to ask you as a sports writer, do you gravitate away from people who are drama, who are off the field? Odell comes to mind, but there are others in my long history of Cleveland fandom who I just don't like because it seems like the story is always about them. But there are superstars like Austin Carr who seem to be like real individuals on the court. And I was watching him back in the 70s. I don't get to hear the games very often that he broadcasts. But Joe Thomas, he's just a normal guy and a wonderful guy. Do you gravitate to them?
Yeah, and I'll tell you the other thing, Hugh. Generally, the drama queens and kings that come through here, you find out they don't play that well too. So they bring a lot of drama and they bring a lot of things that really do, kind of get to you. But when you go back and look at it, you say, all right, um, was it worth it? Odell Beckham wasn't worth it. And some of these other guys that kind of escaped me at the moment wasn't worth Deshaun Watson wasn't worth it. And as you mentioned, Joe Thomas or Andre Thornton, or we could go through most of those guys on that list, virtually all those guys on this list. They were very good at what they did, And I mean, Joe Thomas is a guy that went fishing on Lake Michigan on the day of the NFL draft because he just didn't want to
Yeah.
go to New York and deal with all that stuff. And that's about how it's been ever since then. And I remember Joe Thomas talking to him this last year. His knees were so bad. I mean, he told me I got about 5 hours a week that I could play football. So they get me for a couple hours and one practice. The rest I'm just kind of working with guys on the side and the game, and that was it. And it's a shame because Joe retired before actually like the 2020 team that made the playoffs, which he would have loved. And he's an offensive lineman by nature. Offensive linemen usually are among the most thoughtful people on the team and most unselfish because they have to. And secondly, they know they better stick together because when you notice them, when they blow a block, when a flag is thrown in their direction, rarely does anybody say. Everybody says Joe Thomas, boy, he was a great player, uh, a great tackle. Who watched him play? Really, I mean, other
Yeah.
than the Thomas families, the left tackle, that's it. So I
Well, I
grew
watched
grew up.
Dewan Jones because he's so big. I cannot not watch Dewan Jones, and I hope he
Yeah.
recovers quickly. I want to ask you about owners. I like the Dolans. I think the Dolans do a fine job. I really like Mr. Jacobs, who put the what was the Jake and now is Progressive Field there. I think I like the Haslams. I didn't like the Watson deal, but generally they've settled down after Johnny Manziel. But we've had some bad owners as well. I am wondering, we've had some bad sports writers too. Does the room divide the same way, the journalism room, as the locker room, into people who are negative and people who are positive?
Yes, because I think in any business that is how it rolls. Some people are upbeat, and I remember I think it was my father said something to me one time and said, "Well, you at least give the guy time to screw up before you just bury him."
Ha!
And and that stuck with me. And if it wasn't him, it sounded like something he would say. And he was a warehouse guy, a World War II guy, that generation. And it's a really good thing. But on top of that, Hugh, with the way the internet goes, I mean, I can go right now on my computer, find out how many people read me in the last 10 minutes, last 2 hours, last 24 hours, how it compares to everybody else on the staff. So what does that do? As you know, in your business, it leads to, as they say, have a hot take, get people stirred up. But I have found, and I think you have too, the way you've done your job, take your shots when it's necessary and have your facts lined up. But don't just look to obliterate somebody every day of the week to get attention because it wears off.
I also think, and I've been listening to Terry's talking, I think you've been doing it about 5 years now. When you find two people who are friends, and you've got a good editor in Dave Campbell, and it's a very balanced show, people want to listen to people go long if they're talking from an area of expertise. And when I don't know anything about basketball, I watch it. I really have no idea what they're doing. I have no idea how the plays are rolling. I just like to watch it. You know it. Dave Campbell knows it. I liked your idea, by the way, about getting rid of the corner shot because I hate that shot. But do you immediately, when you listen to people talk about sports, know if they know what they're talking about or if they're just a fan?
Usually, no, I'm weakest on football, and Dave played high school football. He might even played a little bit of college. He was a lineman, so I often defer to him on that. And even when I'm interviewing sources and that, I always say, "Well, this is look, I don't know that much about it." And when I'm talking about the intricacies, the basketball and baseball, I played those in high school. It wasn't very good, but I did, and a little bit of college baseball, but also just having covered Major League Baseball for 6 years every day, and then the NBA for 7 picked up a lot. And I will admit, sometimes I'm watching former players who are doing NBA games, and I'm going, I remember a veteran writer told me early on, he says, a lot of players just know how to play, but they can't even explain how the game works. And that's what I hear sometimes. They
Huh.
don't really give you this is how it is. And uh, because so much of it is not just physical gifts, but just instinctual. So that's the thing there. I'm just so glad. By the way, you mentioned we were talking about good people. Donovan Mitchell and Jose
Yep.
Ramirez would be at the top of the current.
Oh, I missed
The
Jose should be on there, obviously. Yeah.
yeah,
Ooh.
he's thanked for that. I mean, my goodness, this guy, he's the one that should get the statue. Made the commitment to stay in Cleveland from Bonnie, Dominican Republic, over near the Haiti border. Totally unpretentious. It's hard to even get him to do interviews. He just he doesn't care about it. And I know when he watched Frankie Lindor and a couple of his other friends have gone and playing big markets, and it's I don't want to deal with that. He just wants to play ball, and he runs hard on everything. I mean, he's just such a great leader in that respect. And Donovan Mitchell is a chance to be the Jose Ramirez of the Cavaliers. He was traded here. He's from New York City. His dad was a minor league ball player. Donovan's dad currently works for the front office of the New York Mets in a business capacity. And Donovan, when he was traded by Utah, was hoping to go to New York. He didn't. He was instead traded to Cleveland. And he did nothing except be a class act. He waited when it was the best time to sign the extension to stay in Cleveland. He did it. He leads the team, you know, not just in terms on the court, but uh, he's continually lifting people up. And he goes to like Guardians games, he goes to Browns games. And this is a guy that, could have gone the other way. You could have had the Odell Beckham or the drama, and it was just the opposite. So that's what's been
Yeah.
fun of late. You franchises have
I
these
think
two guys.
all of these guys committed to Cleveland. Oral Hershiser
Yeah.
wasn't there very long, but when he was there, he was all in, and those were big years for the Indians and now Guardians, and he was all in. Ray Fosse was all in, but
Mhm.
the guy who defines it, I'm too young to remember Jimmy Brown. I never saw him play. We got season tickets in '65, of course, but Nick Chubb is Jimmy Brown, and I think you mentioned yesterday getting stronger every game and that it's a remarkable
Mhm.
comeback. But he is a classy professional. I mean, he's just a professional in everything he does. I'm not sure if he's a great interview. I've never heard him interviewed, actually. It's like Jose. Does he give interviews?
Yeah, he does once a week. When you want Chubb to open up, ask him about somebody else. He's not going to be great on himself, but like when they signed Kareem Hunt and brought him in here, and Hunt was coming in with some off-field problems. Chubb took Hunt in, and really, I think he was taking some Bible studies there and just the whole thing. And if you notice, Hunt has not had any problems for years since then, playing for Kansas City now. He loves to talk about Kareem Hunt or who the quarterback or somebody else. It's just how he was raised down in Georgia. And you don't blow your own horn, you don't even pick it up. But if somebody else asks you about them, you become a whole symphony of praise. And so
Yeah.
the way he is really aligned. And I am the fact he's on the field, he was amazing. Within 3 months, he had an ACL operation and an MCL, and I'm sure they were cleaning out some scar tissue and that from a big knee injury he had back at University of Georgia when he was still in college. So I am astounded he's back on the field. We won't know the real Nick Chubb till next year, but I'll say this: he's taking out his frustration. Sometime when you watch him, and it says in the backfield, and somebody's trying to blitz the quarterback, he's nailing these rushers. I mean, boy,
Yeah.
he always blocked. He's fierce now.
He's not Wyatt Teller, but he's close. Here's where I want to close, Terry, and why I asked you to come on today. Thanksgiving tomorrow, people will thank their family. They'll be grateful for the blessings in their lives. They'll be grateful to God if they're believers. I am curious, other than Roberta and your parents, who are you grateful for your career, which is as long and longer than mine, actually, by a year, but you've been doing what you love to do for a long time, and that's a great blessing. Who gave you the breaks along the way?
Well, when I was hurting for a job coming out of Cleveland State, and even though I'd worked part time at the old Cleveland Press and sold stories to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, this was the late '70s, and there were no jobs. A guy named Erwin Smallwood hired me at the Greensboro Daily News, and that gave me an opportunity to work at a mid-market paper, which was very good at that time. And when I was there, I met a guy named Will Browning, And then later on, I left Greensboro and went to the Savannah Morning News to do minor league baseball and that. And Will Browning just happened to be at a Maryland Duke basketball game, and a guy named Bill Tanton was a friend of his. And Bill Tanton said, I just lost my baseball writer. I need a baseball writer for the Baltimore Evening Sun. Basically, he said, do you know somebody young, cheap, and good? And
Ha!
he Will Browning handed him my name and phone number, and I get a call out of nowhere from the Baltimore Evening Sun. That's back when they had two papers with the Sun, and said, "I got your name from Will Browning. Uh, would you come up and interview? I just lost my baseball writer to the Washington Star. Would you come up and interview?" I'm like stunned. At first, I wanted to make sure it wasn't a joke, and I interviewed and got the job. And so suddenly, I'm covering the major leagues at the age of 24 with Earl Weaver in that. So
With
that
Earl
whole
Weaver,
thing,
Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar. Whenever you talk about Ben Lively, I always think of
yeah,
Mike Cuellar because they didn't have any stuff, but they win. But you got to go to
yeah,
work because of a guy who told a guy that you were the guy.
exactly.
That's
With the
remarkable.
guy, and at that time I wasn't nearly as close to the Lord I am now, but it is remarkable, and to be able to see that, because then once you get into quote major league journalism, you're there, and you show you can do it. And on top of it, I think having the Orioles at Earl Weaver, my first time in, because Weaver was like going to baseball graduate school. I mean, this is the guy that invented batting averages of pitchers versus hitters, and a lot of early Moneyball stuff came right from his knowledge and the way he looked at it. So, and he loved the writers back then. It was a different game because you didn't have all the internet stuff, so you, you could sit around sometimes talk to him 20, 30 minutes before games. I mean, it really was just astounding and set me up later on to go and do other things. And I was really grateful late in my career. Two people, Susan Goldberg and Deborah Adams Simmons. I was at the Beacon Journal, and this is in 2007, and they called and asked me to come back to the Plain Deal where I'd been earlier, which really helped because unfortunately the Beacon Journal was like a lot of papers, really struggling. And I went through Hugh and Mike from 1999 till about 5 years ago. I went through 12 rounds of layoffs and four sales of papers. Three of them were at the Beacon Journal. So I am thankful just to survive from all that, because it doesn't matter if you're good or not; they don't have to keep you.
Yeah, what's amazing though, not only survive, thrive. I don't know how good Terry's Talking is doing. I think it's doing very well given that there are advertisements in there, but it's fabulous listening. So thank you. Pass on my thanks to Dave. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving tomorrow and a good time down at the mission. And thank you for saying a good word about Angel Tree as well. I first heard about prison ministry from you talking about Bill Glass. And that's
Yes.
another good guy who's not on my list. I had his card, but I don't remember him playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bill.
B,
Bill was with the Brown '60s and just a great pass rushing defensive end. They would have loved him right now because he would have been one of those rushing specialists to come off the bench. For years, he had the Brown sack record, and then for the last 40 some years of his life, he devoted it to prison ministry.
yeah, it's remarkable. Terry Pluto, thank you for everything you do for me and making my life entertaining and enjoyable, and for Terry's Talking, and also for your faith column in the empty chair. Very meaningful to a lot of people this season. You have a great Thanksgiving, and my best to your wife, who someday I will get to meet. Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome, Hugh.